Hello friends, I'm Cammie.
I'm Liam.
And this is From Mad Max to the Matrix, the show where I introduce movies to this here 13-year-old. Classic movies from the 80s and 90s, and then we discuss them. You may have noticed, if you've been watching this live, that our last episode, there were several weeks between them. The reason for that is we started to get behind, and it took us a little while to kind of get caught up. So going forward, it was a little unfeasible for us to try and record a video every week. So going forward, we're going to try and do them every 2 weeks. We might, thumbs up. That way we've got some time to record and some downtime, so we're not watching 2 or 3 movies every single week. So what did we watch? Well, okay, and this video was recorded over the course of like 3 weeks that we watched movies.
Yeah.
What did we watch?
Ghostbusters, Nightmare on Elm Street, and the Terminator.
Okay. Going forward, for those of you listening, we will have no restraint on spoilers for any of these movies. We'll get started with Ghostbusters. For each one of these episodes, we always get a star rating from Liam to see how much he liked it. It's a 5-star scale. 1 star hated it, 2 stars didn't like it, 3 stars liked it, and 4 stars really liked it, 5 stars loved it. How would you rate Ghostbusters?
A 4-star.
4 stars? Cool.
Because, I felt like at points it was a little slow, but it was good.
Yeah, that's valid. How would you summarize this film? What happened?
So...
It started with 3, and then they added a 4th.
So, there were 3 people who were taking calls on supernatural events.
Mm-hmm.
They found one. They encountered a ghost. Freaked out. They ran away. They then started a business getting rid of ghosts. They got a call from someone, and then after they got a call, they went to that person's apartment. They didn't see anything odd. Then I can't remember.
That's all right. It doesn't need to be super detailed. But after that, they then the person whose house they go to had a portal to another dimension in her refrigerator.
Oh yeah.
And then it's the end times, and there are all kinds of ghosts popping out everywhere. And then a person from the EPA shuts off their ghost containment unit, and then they confront the otherworldly creature that was trying to come through, Gozer the Gozerian, and then they fight the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Yeah, and in between fighting the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and Gozer, they do exactly what at the beginning of the movie they are told not to do.
And what is that?
Don't cross streams.
The movie is kind of weird. It's got a lot of bizarre ideas, which we'll get to right now. The movie was written by Dan Aykroyd, who also wrote Blues Brothers. And when we talked about Blues Brothers... Yes, thank you. When we talked about that movie, we talked about how it was kind of a movie about nothing, because that's just the way Dan Aykroyd writes. For those of you listening, there's a great video about Ghostbusters being about nothing by Patrick H. Willems. I'll put a link down in the description if you want to watch it. But one of the things that Dan Aykroyd does when he writes a script is he just throws every insane idea he has and then just waits for the director to kind of make sense of it. And that's what he did with this movie also. The original treatment for this film had all kinds of really bizarre shit. Like Ecto-1 could fly their car. And there's one part where they go to space. And there's one part that's like in the far field. It's nuts. And that's why there's kind of just all kinds of crazy shit that happens, just like Blues Brothers. So the movie has quite a big cast. It stars Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Sigourney Weaver, Ernie Hudson, Rick Moranis, William Atherton, and Annie Potts.
Sigourney Weaver was one of the characters from Alien, right?
Yeah, she played Ripley in Alien. Rick Moranis, who plays Lewis, the Keymaster, was also the dad in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. The 3 primary Ghostbusters were Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis. The movie originally wasn't supposed to have Bill Murray in it. It was supposed to have John Belushi, who played Jake in Blues Brothers. But
wait, was the guy that was not supposed to be in here, was he the black person?
No, it was the guy who played Venkman. There's an interesting story about Ernie Hudson, who played Winston, the black guy, that he was also replaced No, Venkman was the guy who at the beginning was doing the test of psychics.
The completely rigged test of psychics.
Because he wanted to hook up with that one person on the study. The movie had a lot of alumni from Saturday Night Live, which you remember when we talked about Saturday Night Live with Blues Brothers? That was where a lot of these people came from. Bill Murray also notoriously in his movies, especially back then, refused to learn his lines and would just kind of ad-lib everything. So a lot of the really crazy shit that Venkman says was just Bill Murray being Bill Murray. Like, it's true. This man has no dick. As far as Ernie Hudson, who plays Winston, the movie originally was supposed to have another SNL actor named Eddie Murphy, but there was something about Eddie Murphy's schedule at the time that conflicted, so they recast the role. Because it wasn't the person that they had originally intended, they cut the role of Winston way down. That's why he doesn't show up until like halfway through the movie, and he doesn't have a whole lot to do. That would be why. The movie was directed by a guy named Ivan Reitman, so he was the one who was responsible for making sense of Dan Aykroyd's nonsense. We'll be watching him again in either 89 or 90, I don't remember. He also directed Kindergarten Cop. Do you have any questions for me about Ghostbusters?
No.
Okay. What did you know about it going in? Because it's a pretty famous movie.
I didn't really know anything, actually.
Okay. I know you recognized at the end, you were like, oh, what's the monster? And I said, oh, you're going to recognize this monster as soon as he shows up?
Yep.
Yeah.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
This movie is so iconic in pop culture. Like, so many people know a lot about it. So I'm kind of surprised that that was the only part that you were aware of ahead of time. Have you heard the theme song? The Ghostbusters theme song? What about the line, who you going to call?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So here's kind of a trick question that we already touched on. What would you say the metatextual commentary of the movie is? Like, what's its theme and meaning?
There isn't one.
Exactly. It's a movie about nothing. None of the characters have discernible character arcs who grow. They're the exact same people at the end as they were at the beginning. The plot is barely there. There's some stuff about the Environmental Protection Agency, but it never really goes anywhere. Yeah, it's a movie about nothing.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not an amazing movie, but yeah, it's not about anything.
Just like Blues Brothers was a good movie.
Yeah, exactly. That was just full of a bunch of nonsense. Like, oh, there's Nazis suddenly. I hate Illinois Nazis. Let's talk about Nightmare on Elm Street. What star rating would you give Nightmare on Elm Street?
4 star.
4 stars? Okay, cool. Personally, if I were rating this movie, I would give it somewhere between 3 and 4. I really like it for the most part. What would you say the plot of Nightmare on Elm Street is? What happens in it?
Okay, so there's a murderer named Freddy Krueger who goes into the dreams of people and murders them that way.
That's pretty much it. Let me give you some context about this movie. It was directed by a guy named Wes Craven, who went on to do a lot of horror movies.
Like what?
He did the movie Scream from the 90s. He did a lot of fairly obscure movies. Like, I think he did Night of the Demons, which was pretty good. We won't be watching any of his movies. I don't know if I said that. This movie was also the first film for the actor Johnny Depp. Do you know who he is?
Yes.
Yeah, he's very prolific. He's been in a lot of stuff. And this was his first movie. We won't be watching any of his movies again on the show, but you have seen him before because he went on to play Edward Scissorhands. The guy who played Freddy Krueger was a guy named Robert Englund. After this movie and all the sequels, he went on to play a lot of horror roles. We're going to wait till that beeping stops. Eventually. They're fixing that storm drain out there. Yeah, so Robert Englund went on to do a lot of different things. Nothing that we're going to be watching, but he still did. The other actor we'll be seeing again is a guy named John Saxon. He played the police chief dad. He's one of those actors who's been in a lot of things, but like as little bit roles. We'll see him again in 1996, but I don't know like how big a role he played in the movie that we're watching. I don't remember him in it. There's a line in the movie that I said I wanted to come back to when Nancy is talking about how all of this stress has made her age. And she says, oh, I look like I'm 20. Do you remember me mentioning that?
I don't.
So she says that all of the characters in this movie are supposed to be 15 years old. Do any of them look like 15-year-olds that you've seen? People who are only a little bit older than you are now?
They look like adults.
Because they were all played by adults. A lot of movies do this where they, and I really want to talk about this, where they cast adults in their early 20s to play teenagers. One of the most egregious things is in 2002, Tobey Maguire was cast to play Spider-Man, a 16-year-old. He was 29.
That's a big difference.
Yep. On Stranger Things, you know Steve on Stranger Things, you've only watched part of the first season, which he was like 21, I think, playing a 16, 17-year-old, which isn't too bad. But now he's playing like an 18 or 19-year-old. He's 30. It's ridiculous. Yeah, so the woman who played Nancy was actually 20 years old at the time. Do you have any questions for me about Nightmare on Elm Street?
No.
I know a lot of the time you have technical questions, like how did they achieve a particular
Yeah, how do they light someone on fire?
Okay, so there's this, they'll wear a fireproof suit, usually, and then there's a gel that prevents the heat from the fire from getting to the skin, but that gel will eventually burn off. It's a pretty big stunt to light someone on fire, but they literally just light them on fire. There are a lot of precautions, but they light them on fire.
I figured it was like a puppet or something that they lit on fire.
Nope, those were people. Whenever you see someone lit on fire, almost 100% of the time, people. I did mention that particular stunt because the stunt person is lit on fire and falls downstairs.
Yeah.
Which is two dangerous stunts in one. Like, because when people fall, especially downstairs, they wear a whole bunch of pads and then just kind of throw themselves downstairs. But to do that while on fire, that's exceptionally difficult.
I mean, it might put out the fire a little bit.
Nah, maybe. They usually use a solid fuel so that it just continues burning no matter how they move. What about the scene when Johnny Depp's character gets pulled into the mattress? Do you remember that scene?
Yeah, and then there's a fountain.
Friggin' gusher of blood. Your mom both loves and hates that scene because she saw it when she was about your age and she had a waterbed at the time. And while she was watching it, the only thing your grandfather said to her was, there's not that much blood in a human body.
Oh.
The way they achieved that shot is they basically just had a version of the set that was flipped upside down along with the camera and just poured a bunch of blood out. Just like when the girl gets attacked by Freddy and she gets thrown into the corner and pulled around on the ceiling.
Yeah. It's
the same thing. They had a set that turned over. Just like the hallway fight in Inception.
Oh, that's how they did it.
Yep. That's an old trick. An old Hollywood trick. So I have some questions for you. This is another one of those movies that's, like Ghostbusters, has a lot of pop culture awareness. So what did you know about the movie going in?
I know that one of the main characters is Freddy Krueger and he kills people.
Did you know kind of how he killed people? Like with his...
Yeah.
The razors, the big knives on his fingers? Like Edward Scissorhands.
Okay, except he doesn't kill people.
No, he doesn't. Although he does explode a waterbed.
Yeah, doesn't he throw someone off of a building? Like out of a building?
I don't remember.
Because I think he pushed someone through a window out of a building.
Maybe? I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen that. So, do you remember when we watched Alien and I talked about slasher movies?
Yeah.
This is a slasher movie where there's a monster, there's a limited group of characters and a monster that hunts them down and kills them one by one until there's a final girl. So this movie leans into the final girl trope. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the ending.
When the person got pulled through the door or the window?
Yeah, Nancy's mom. A lot of movies, not a lot of movies, but some movies will use that kind of ending where like a character wakes up and like, oh, it was all a dream. 99% of the time, I hate it. Because it like completely takes away, usually it doesn't make sense in the context of the film. And it takes away all of the kind of drama of the movie to be like, oh, it was all a dream, nothing matters. But this movie, that was the point. Because it's called A Nightmare on Elm Street. Nancy's having a nightmare
about this. Lives on Elm Street.
Yep, about this guy going around killing her friends and stuff. So I kind of like the fact that that was there. However, this movie suffers from some studio interference right at the end. Because do you remember the part she walks out and suddenly Freddy Krueger is the car and he pulls Nancy's mom through the window and stuff? Did that feel kind of out of place for you? Yeah, it does for me too. It does for a lot of people because the studio wanted to turn this into a franchise, like Friday the 13th and Halloween were both kind of long-running horror franchises, slasher franchises, so they wanted to do that. As far as Wes Craven was concerned, the movie was over. So they had to be like, oh, well, just make it so that Freddy's still alive, even though it makes no sense. If you kind of ignore the fact that he's the car and the fact that he kills Nancy's mom, I think it's a great movie. Do you think this movie has some kind of metatextual commentary?
I don't.
There's this guy named Robert McKee. He wrote a book called Story, which is basically all about crafting stories. And one of the things that he talks about doing is having a central theme. Like it could just be one word or like a few words. Basically every scene in the movie. I'm sorry if there's beeping in the background for people listening. They're doing some road work outside and we can't like stop talking every time someone does something with a truck, so I apologize. So I feel like one of the big things that there is a through line in the movie of dreams and fear. The bulk of the movie kind of reinforces. Do you have anything else you want to add about that one?
No.
No? Okay. I also didn't ask if there was anything you wanted to add about Ghostbusters. Is there anything you want to add about that? No? Okay. Let's move on to the Terminator. What would you rate Terminator?
5 stars.
5 stars. I was wondering when we first started this show and I asked you what's your favorite movie that you've seen, you said Terminator. So I assumed it would still be 5 stars. How would you summarize this movie?
There's a cyborg. It's a cyborg, right?
I think Reese calls him a cyborg, a cybernetic organism.
So there's a cyborg that goes around terminating people, and there's one person who is tasked with stopping the Terminator from killing the person who gives birth to the leader of that person who went back to kill the Terminator, who's trying to, like, it's just a loop.
Yep, it's a time loop movie. I love that about it, that it just continuously feeds back into itself. So let's talk context. This movie stars Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, who we're going to be seeing a bunch of his stuff. We saw him previously as Conan. He did Conan, and then he did this movie, and on the back of those two films, he went on to be incredibly popular in the 80s and 90s. So we'll be seeing him a bunch. We're actually going to see him next week when we watch Commando. The movie also stars Linda Hamilton, who was Sarah. We'll see her again as Sarah in T2. She didn't do a lot of other stuff. The movie also stars Michael Biehn as Reese, who also didn't go on to do a lot of stuff. We'll see him again next week? No, the week after, when we watch Aliens, which is the sequel to the first Alien movie.
Wait, so it's Alien, then Aliens.
Yep. And then Alien 3. And then Alien Resurrection.
That is very confusing.
And then Alien vs. Predator. And then Alien vs. Predator Requiem. And then Prometheus. And then, what was the most recent one called? Alien Covenant, I think, was the most recent one.
That's ridiculous.
We're only going to be watching the first two. The third one's okay, but we're only going to be watching the first two. The movie was written and directed by James Cameron. We're going to be watching 2 more times. We're going to watch Aliens and Terminator 2. But he's made quite a few movies, including the 2 highest grossing movies of all time before Avengers Endgame came along. He directed a movie in 1997 called Titanic, which is about the boat. And he made a movie in 2009 called Avatar, which is about a bunch of blue aliens. Titanic was the highest grossing film of all time until Avatar came along, and then Avatar was the highest grossing movie of all time until Avengers Endgame in 2019. So he's a very, very popular director.
Is it 2019?
Yep.
I thought it was last year.
Endgame? No. Because it came out just before the pandemic shut down everything. Like November or something like that, 2019. So you've seen this movie before.
Yep.
You saw a different version of the movie. Previously saw a fan edit that I found online that takes all of the deleted scenes and adds them back in. So the big differences between the version that you saw before, which you've seen multiple times, We get a little bit more with the cops in the middle of the movie. In the middle of the movie. So instead of just like 2, maybe 3 scenes with them, we see them a few more times before. So we're a bit more invested when they die. Also, the second half of the movie has changed quite a bit. In the theatrical version, the version we watched, once after the police station, just kind of turns into a chase movie where they're running from the Terminator and the Terminator's following them, and then a steady escalation until they finally kill the Terminator. In the original version, there was a whole bunch of stuff about Cyberdyne, and there's a whole arc about Sarah kind of becoming the character we see in the second movie. So she kind of becomes the leader, and Reese kind of just starts following her orders by the end. But she wants to attack Cyberdyne. And
in the second movie?
In the first movie. So she wants to attack Cyberdyne. They find out where Cyberdyne is, and they're in the process of going to Cyberdyne with the pipe bombs and stuff to destroy the factory. And the Terminator's chasing them, trying to keep up. And then the factory at the end, of course, is a Cyberdyne factory. They get the Terminator parts and make the Terminator and make Skynet. I think it adds a lot to the whole second half of the movie.
Now that I think about it, if they got it earlier, that means they'd have more time to advance it, which means it'd be more advanced, so that a more advanced Terminator would be sent back, and it would just kind of grow and grow.
Now you're getting into the later movies. There's one of the later movies, I think it's Genesis, where a Terminator goes back to... It's real dumb. A Terminator goes back to like 1975 and befriends Sarah when she's a kid. It's a dumb movie, but yeah, I feel that the fan edit really adds a lot. I remember when I was a kid, I loved this movie and I loved the second movie, but the second movie, of course, has all this stuff about Cyberdyne, and I felt that it kind of didn't really mesh with the first movie, because the first movie didn't have any plot like that. Turns out the first movie did have plot like that, it just got cut.
I don't know why.
So, James Cameron was a pretty new writer and director. This was really only his first movie. He worked on another movie prior to this, but he didn't have any kind of real creative control, and he was fired from it. So this is his first real movie. So what the studios did, basically, was they stripped out a lot of the scenes that weren't action scenes, and they kind of mostly just left the action scenes. That's why, like, in the first half, there's all the scenes where Reese is explaining the Terminator, and they all happen during car chases. That's why it happens during car chases, so that the studio wouldn't cut.
So he put all the important stuff in a car chase so that they couldn't cut it.
Yep. I mean, otherwise, the studio may have cut all the explanation scenes about the Terminator, and then just added a throwaway line here or there.
Didn't you mention at one point that there was, in one movie, there was a kiss scene between a black person and a non-black person, and they made it so it was during something important so that the studio couldn't cut it? Sort
of. We talked about Star Trek. It's an episode of the original series Star Trek. It came out in 1968, I think the episode aired. I think it was season 2. Because everything was shot on film, and it was a TV show in the 60s they could only do 2 takes. They did one take where you could see them kissing, and another take where you couldn't really see them kissing, and the lead actor, William Shatner, right in the middle of the scene, looked at the camera and crossed his eyes. So he intentionally flubbed that scene, so they had to show it. But I think that's what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
What would you say Terminator is about? Like, what's its emotional core?
I don't know.
Personally, I would say its emotional core is the love story between Sarah and Reese. I think it's mostly about that, not necessarily about the fact that they're getting chased by a robot from the future. Because there's the scene where Reese says, "I traveled across time for you, Sarah." I wrote a whole paper in college that was comparing and contrasting this movie with Titanic, because a lot of people look at Titanic as a love story, and I feel like it's an action movie.
It's about a sinking boat.
Yeah, it's a really good movie. I wasn't planning on watching it, because we've got a bunch of other stuff, but maybe we will. I don't know. It's a really good movie. It sets up the 2 main characters for a little while, and like the whole last 2/3 of the movie is like one long action scene as the boat's sinking and they're trying to survive and like people are dying. It's a great movie, but yeah, anyway. So that's what I would say it's about. I would say its emotional core is kind of a love story. And there's also that time loop narrative, which it doesn't really get into, but it's definitely there. I mean, you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Which I definitely want to come back to that time loop thing when we watch the second movie in 91. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No.
to Terminator? I don't think I had any other questions for you. Oh, I did have one quick question before we leave this movie behind. We mentioned the fact that the version you had seen before was a different cut of the movie and had more stuff. Did you notice the differences while we were watching it?
Not really.
No? Okay. Because I remember asking you while we were watching it, you said the same thing then. I wasn't sure if you maybe had a different feeling. Next time, we're going to be doing a study of 1985. We're going to watch Commando, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and Return to Oz. All of these movies are fantastic for completely different reasons. You remember the first week that we did, the first episode we did, and I made a joke
Yeah,
about...
it was The Muppets, Alien, and Blues Brothers, right?
It wasn't Blues Brothers week 1. It was week 2 that we did Blues... What was the other one?
Return of the Jedi. Was it Star Wars?
I don't think it was Empire. I think Empire was 1980 also. Let me look. Alien... Oh, Mad Max.
Yeah.
That was the other one we watched. How those movies are nothing alike. It's the same thing next time. We're going to be watching just a totally macho, brainless action movie. We're going to be watching an incredibly goofy, dumb comedy. Or we're going to be watching a kids' horror movie. So very, very different movies. Return to Oz is a horror movie.
But
You'll have to watch. Those of you listening at home or at work or in the car who have seen Return to Oz know exactly what I'm talking about. You are going to have nightmares of the Wheelers. Such a good movie. Do you have anything you want to add to the folks at home? Nothing you want to say? All right. So for those of you listening along at home, if you want to watch any of these movies, I've got some affiliate links down in the description, as well as some other ways. That truck outside is back. As well as some other ways to support the channel if you're feeling frisky. And thanks for hanging out with us. Bye.
bye.